The boots hit the floor first. Mud from a road in Lorraine, grease from a tank that had been hit twice and kept moving, the smell of cordite that doesn't come out of fabric for days. And the men wearing those boots were standing inside Patton's war room. Colonel Allen, Deputy G2 of the Third Army, described it directly. Groups of tankers and doughboys, hand grenades still dangling from their lapels, the reek of battle fresh and pungent on them, were a common sight inside that room. Maps on the walls, staff officers in clean uniforms, and men who had been in contact with the enemy hours earlier, standing right there, talking. Allen added 4 words that changed everything. That was never seen at any other Army headquarters. Pause on that sentence. Not rarely seen. Not unusual. Never. In the entire Allied chain of command in the European theater, no other Army headquarters operated this way. The question isn't why it looked strange. The question is why Patton built it deliberately, and what it meant when the men carrying that battlefield knowledge came from units the Army had decided, by regulation, were second tier. Every other headquarters operated on the same assumption. It was logical. It felt correct. It had been the standard for decades. The assumption was this: knowledge flows downward and information flows upward through the chain. A soldier observes, his sergeant reports, the captain filters, the colonel synthesizes. By the time anything reaches Army-level staff, it has been processed, categorized, and formatted. The staff officer knows the war through a document. The document knows the war through a chain of intermediaries. This wasn't negligence. It was doctrine. The idea was that raw observation from the field was unreliable, emotionally charged, tactically narrow, impossible to verify without context. The system existed to solve exactly that problem. Other American headquarters trusted the system. They believed the filter made the information better. Patton believed the filter made it late. From the moment he assumed command, he moved to break the distance between the war room and the road. He mandated that one officer from each staff section and from each subordinate corps would visit line units every single day and report vital information to the Chief of Staff immediately upon returning. Not weekly, not in a written report submitted at the end of the month. Daily. The commanding general or chief of staff was required to do the same. Think about what that requirement means structurally. It isn't a gesture. It is a formal inversion of how most headquarters understood information. The staff was not waiting for the battlefield to send its data upward through the chain. The staff was going to the battlefield and bringing it back directly. And the reverse was also true. Frontline troops were welcome around the headquarters, not just to receive orders, to give information. Picture the composite of what Colonel Allen described: a tanker from a line unit. Late autumn, 1944. France turning cold. He has been through contact, real contact, the kind that leaves residue on clothing and a particular stillness in the eyes. He arrives at the Third Army War Room not to ask for something. He arrives because someone there needs to know what he knows. What the road looks like after armor has crossed it, where the mines are being placed that the maps haven't caught yet, what the tank performed and what it didn't, which route bled which unit and why. That information exists nowhere in a document at that moment. It exists in his memory, in his hands, in the specifics of what he watched happen. I want to pause here and say something plainly. This is where the story stops being about battlefield efficiency and becomes about something harder. Because Patton's Third Army in the autumn of 1944 included the 761st Tank Battalion, a segregated black unit that entered combat under his command in early November of that year in the Lorraine. The army that sent them into battle was the same army that, by official policy, had classified them as less capable. The same army that had debated whether black soldiers could perform in armor at all. And Patton's war room was the room where what a man knew mattered more than where the army said he stood. The 761st fought through some of the worst terrain and most contested ground of the fall campaign. Mud, mines, villages fortified by German defenders who had time to prepare. They absorbed losses and kept moving forward. They accumulated the specific, granular, irreplaceable knowledge that only comes from men who have been through contact at close range. The culture Colonel Allen described did not ask for credentials before it listened. It asked, "Is this information real? Is it from someone who was there?" Here is the detail that turns the whole picture from institutional to something else entirely. The army officially doubted these men's capabilities before they fought. The war room's culture, as Patton designed it, required listening to what they had learned after they did. The system created a friction the army had not planned for. The same institution that built the segregation had also built the feedback loop. And those two things pointed in opposite directions. If the part of war that interests you is the hidden machinery behind the headline, the kind where culture and doctrine collide and neither one wins cleanly, this is exactly that kind of story. That friction had a cost. The men who walked into the war room with mud on their boots and information in their heads walked back out into an army that still rated them separately, housed them separately, and in many cases promoted them more slowly. Patton's culture of feedback did not dissolve the segregation. It created a specific and uncomfortable exception to it. In this room, for this purpose, what you know counts. PO3. I don't think this gets remembered the way it should. The 761st is remembered for its combat record. What gets less attention is the institutional friction embedded in the moment a man from that unit stood in that room and was listened to, not as a symbol, but as a source. The machine almost broke not from enemy fire, but from its own internal contradiction. An army that officially undervalued certain men was simultaneously dependent on the knowledge only those men could carry back from the ground. That is not a clean story. It is not a triumph. It is a structural fault line running through the middle of a genuine institutional innovation. What Patton built worked. The Third Army's pursuit across France was faster, more adaptive, and better informed than what doctrine predicted was possible. The feedback loops, formal and informal, officer and enlisted, gave the headquarters a quality of situational awareness that other Army-level commands did not have. Colonel Allen's observation was not sentimental. It was an operational assessment. The war room worked because it refused to treat the chain of command as the only valid chain of knowledge, and what the 761st Tank Battalion and men like them carried into that room was proof of something the Army's own regulations had tried to prevent. That expertise does not sort by the categories an institution assigns before the shooting starts. It sorts by who was there. The boots on the floor of the war room were the proof. The smell was the evidence. The maps on the wall did not update themselves. They were updated by the men who had been somewhere the map had not yet caught up to. That was the quiet advantage. Not a weapon, not a formation. A room where the right people were allowed to walk in. And the information they carried was treated as real. If you want more episodes about the institutional systems behind the battles, most histories summarize in a single paragraph. This is the lane.